Okay, let's unpack this. For a really intense couple of days, there was this real sense of anxiety hanging over Minnesota.
Definitely, you could feel it.
Authorities were scrambling, launching what they pretty quickly called the largest manhunt in the state's history.
Yeah, hundreds of officers, multiple agencies, just
Yeah.
nonstop.
So we've gathered a whole stack of sources covering this event, the manhunt for Vance Boelter after those shootings. We've got details on the timeline, the police tactics, the key discoveries that led to his capture.
Right.
And our mission here in this deep dive is to really sift through all that material and pull out the most important insights, maybe some surprising facts for you.
Lay it all out clearly.
Exactly. We'll trace it from the chaotic start, look at the sheer scale of the police response, how investigators actually tracked him, using clues he kind of left behind.
Almost accidentally helping them.
Right. And then that pivotal moment, the climax that led to a peaceful capture, which wasn't necessarily expected.
And as we walk through the sources, you'll really see how these small details or specific tactical choices ended up making a huge difference in an operation this big.
Yeah.
It's a really fascinating look at how these complex manhunts actually play out under intense pressure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive right in. Starting at the beginning with those initial violent acts. The sources tell us the shootings happened early on June 14th. It was around 2:05 a.m. at the Hoffman Place in Champlin, and then another incident about an hour and a half later, 3:35 a.m., at the Hortman residence in Brooklyn Park.
And right there, that second location, the sources really emphasize a critical point. Brooklyn Park police responding proactively to that Hortman home.
Proactively, how so?
Well, their quick response, getting there when they did, likely prevented more violence. BCA Superintendent Drew Evans is quoted saying the violence likely would have continued if officers hadn't shown up right then.
Wow. So their timing was crucial. It wasn't just reactive, it's stopped things from escalating further.
Exactly. It seems like it fundamentally changed what could have happened next that morning.
So what did that confrontation look like, based on the sources, when officers arrived?
Well, they get there and find Boelter, and get this, he's disguised as a police officer.
Oh, way.
Yeah, using a modified SUV, he'd rigged it up with emergency lights, looked like a fake police vehicle, apparently quite convincing.
Okay, that's unsettling.
And then officers actually witnessed him shoot Mark Hortman through the door. That immediately led to an exchange of gunfire right there between Boelter and the officers.
A direct shootout. But he wasn't caught right then and there.
No, he managed to get away in that moment. After the gunfire, he apparently went back inside the house for a bit, then fled the scene on foot. He ditched the fake police SUV.
Okay. He abandons the vehicle.
And abandoning that vehicle, trying to escape, it actually turned out to be a massive break for the investigators. A gold mine, really.
A gold mine? Why? What did they find in it?
This is where it gets really significant, according to the sources. Inside that SUV, they found 3 AK-47 assault rifles.
3.
3, plus a 9mm handgun, and critically, a list. A list with about 70 names and addresses on it.
70 names. Who was on the list?
The sources specify it included public officials, lawmakers, community leaders, and also abortion rights advocates. They also found flyers inside with "No Kings" printed on them.
Okay, finding that list
Yeah.
with those kinds of names alongside multiple assault rifles and those flyers,
Yeah.
that must have completely changed their understanding of what was going on.
Absolutely. It instantly suggested this wasn't random. It pointed towards something potentially targeted, maybe politically motivated. It gave them immediate, vital intelligence about his possible intentions, and frankly raised the threat level significantly.
A much more concerning picture. So he escapes on foot from Brooklyn Park after that shootout. Where does he head next, according to the timeline?
Just a few hours later, still Saturday morning, June 14th, around 6 a.m., the sources say he briefly went back to a room he was renting in Minneapolis. And while he was there, he sent some text messages to his roommates. Mentioned making bad choices, said he didn't want to get them involved, and then something ominous, like he may be dead soon.
Wow. Those texts, they give you a glimpse into his state of mind, right? Distress, maybe regret over the choices, but also sounds like he was preparing for a bad end, or maybe determined not to be taken.
Yeah, it hints at both, distress, but also maybe an intent to resist capture. And crucially for the investigation, surveillance cameras at that Minneapolis place caught him, and he was wearing a cowboy hat.
A cowboy hat seems like a small detail.
It was small then, but it became a key identifier later on. Sources also mentioned he broke a window there, though they don't specify if he grabbed another car right at that point.
So even in these first chaotic hours, While he's trying to get away, he's leaving this trail, the abandoned SUV packed with weapons, and that list, the revealing text messages, even a visual clue like the hat.
Exactly, all these breadcrumbs. And that really sets the stage for the massive response that followed.
And it was massive. Brooklyn Park Police Chief Mark Bruley didn't mince words, calling it the largest manhunt in Minnesota's history.
Yeah, unprecedented for the state. The search went on for, over 36 hours, maybe closer to 43 hours by the time it ended.
And that kind of scale, it must have required incredible coordination.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't just one department's issue. It was a huge multi-agency effort. The sources list, local police from Brooklyn Park, Champlain, Hennepin, and Ramsey County sheriffs, state agencies like the BCA, the State Patrol, and federal partners, the FBI, U.S. Marshals.
Everyone involved.
Pretty much. Officials later credited the success to what they called relentless and determined police work and just really strong cooperation between all those different groups.
What kind of actual resources did they throw at this for a search that big?
Well, hundreds of officers on the ground to start. Sources mentioned something like 20 different tactical teams, SWAT teams were brought in. They divided up search areas to be more systematic. The State Patrol had helicopters up constantly, providing air support for hours and hours, which is critical for covering ground. Then you had ground searches, armored vehicles, ATVs, and later, as things narrowed down, drones came into play.
Sounds intense.
Governor Walz even pointed out officers were out there searching on Father's Day, showing the level of dedication.
Beyond the people and vehicles, what about the legal side? And how did they manage public information during this huge search?
So legally, they got a nationwide arrest warrant issued pretty quickly. Interestingly, the sources note it was kept under seal at first.
Why seal it?
Likely a tactical move. To prevent Boelter from knowing the full extent of the legal pressure right away, maybe keep him from changing tactics if he knew everyone was looking nationwide.
Makes sense.
The FBI also jumped in with a significant reward up to $50,000 for information leading to his arrest. And public appeals were constant. Report sightings immediately, but, and this was stressed, do not approach him. He was considered armed and dangerous.
Right, and children place orders in certain areas too.
Yes, in areas where the search was actively concentrated, they issued those for resident safety.
Now, there was also an interesting lead early on involving his family, wasn't there?
Yes, a potentially significant one. On that first morning, June 14th, way up near Onamia, police stopped a vehicle. Inside were Boelter's wife and some other relatives.
And what did they find?
According to the sources, a search of their car turned up a weapon, ammunition, cash, and passports.
Passports and cash. That definitely raises eyebrows.
It absolutely did. They were questioned, detained for a bit, but ultimately not taken into custody at that time. But finding those items, especially the cash and passports.
It suggests he might have been planning a longer escape, right? Maybe even trying to get out of the state or the country.
Exactly. It signaled to law enforcement that he might have access to resources, maybe even support, for a more extended flight plan than just hiding locally. It helped justify bringing in federal agencies like the FBI and U.S. Marshals, broadening the search beyond just the metro.
So it raised questions about possible assistance, even if they later thought he acted alone in the actual shootings themselves.
Precisely. It added another layer of complexity to the manhunt early on.
Okay, so you've got this enormous coordinated search involving everyone from local cops to federal agents. Public alerts are out. There are hints he might have help or resources to flee further. How did they actually start to figure out where he was? How did they zero in?
Yeah, this is where the tracking game really begins, and it's fascinating how it unfolded based on the sources. His pattern of abandoning vehicles, which you'd think would help him disappear, actually became the key way they tracked him down.
How so? The abandoned cars helped them.
Yeah, each one essentially acted like a breadcrumb, progressively narrowing down the possible search area.
Okay, so walk us through those breadcrumbs again.
All right, first you have the fake police SUV ditched at the Hortman shooting scene in Brooklyn Park. That's breadcrumb 1.
Got it.
Then, later they find a second vehicle, believed to be his personal one, back at that Minneapolis residence where he stopped briefly. Breadcrumb 2.
Okay, still in the metro.
But then comes the pivotal discovery, according to all the sources. The third abandoned vehicle. This was a dark Ford SUV found Sunday morning, June 15th, around 10 a.m., and its location was crucial.
Where was it?
Out in rural Sibley County, specifically Faxon Township near Highway 25 and Three Horst Avenue. And importantly, this is near Green Isle, where he had a home.
Okay. So from the suburbs to the city, then way out to a rural area near his home base. That third vehicle discovery must have drastically shrunk the search zone.
Absolutely. It immediately shifted the entire focus of this massive manhunt to Sibley County. And confirming they were on the right track near that third SUV, investigators found something else.
That was it.
That cowboy hat. The same one seen on the surveillance footage back in
A
Minneapolis.
hat. See, that small detail came back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sources also confirmed they found other items of relevance inside that third vehicle, though they didn't specify what, reinforcing that this was his vehicle and a critical find.
It's almost ironic, isn't it? He's ditching cars, probably thinking he's being clever, switching vehicles, throwing them off his trail.
Right.
But each time he does it, he basically just gives law enforcement a clearer, smaller box to look inside. His own evasion tactics ended up guiding the pursuit.
That's precisely the point the sources highlight. His actions, meant to confuse and escape, inadvertently created this trail that they could follow methodically, step by step, reducing the search from this huge metro and surrounding area down to a specific rural county.
And what was that landscape like in Sibley County? Did the sources mention challenges there?
Oh, yeah. Sources describe it as typical Minnesota countryside, streams, fields, woods, crops, lots of places to hide, difficult terrain to cover systematically on foot.
Not easy for a ground search.
Definitely not. There was even a point mentioned where an officer thought they saw him running into some woods, which triggered a really intensive ground search in that specific tough area.
That sounds like exactly the kind of situation where having eyes in the sky becomes invaluable.
Precisely. And that's why the sources emphasize the role of the State Patrol helicopter, which was up almost constantly. And then later, the use of drones once the search area got smaller. It was a direct strategic response to that difficult terrain.
Makes sense. Allows them to cover way more ground efficiently.
Right. Scanning fields, edges of woods, creek beds, places that would take ground teams ages to search thoroughly. It was about maximizing effectiveness in that environment.
Okay, so the hunt is now laser focused on Sibley County. Difficult terrain, but they have hundreds of officers converging there. This feels like the end game.
It really was the climax. After finding that third vehicle, sources confirm, hundreds of officers flooded the area. We're talking SWAT teams, snipers, FBI agents, the works.
Wow.
They put out an emergency alert specifically for Sibley County residents. Lock your doors, report anything suspicious, allow property searches, and they set up a large tactical perimeter to try and box him in within that rural zone.
So they've got him contained, theoretically. How did they finally pinpoint his exact location inside that perimeter? After hours of searching.
This is where it gets really interesting, a blend of community help and technology. Around 7 p.m. that Sunday, after all this searching, a local resident in Sibley County came forward with a crucial tip.
A tip, what kind?
Their trail camera had captured an image described as consistent with Boelter.
A trail camera. Seriously. In the middle of the state's biggest manhunt, a simple trail camera breaks the case open.
Kind of amazing, right? It just shows how vital information can come from unexpected places. And that tip, that image, was the key. It led authorities directly to the next step.
Which was?
Deploying drones immediately. They used the drones to fly over the area indicated by the trail cam, confirm it was him, and pinpoint his exact location within that perimeter they'd set up. So citizen tip meets high-tech confirmation.
Okay, so trail cam spots him, drone confirms it. Did he just surrender then?
Not immediately. Sources say he actually tried to evade them for about another hour, even after being located by the drone.
He kept running.
Tried to, yeah. But law enforcement had that perimeter tight and multiple teams ready. Sources describe 8 teams of officers literally crawling in ditches to close in on him slowly, methodically cutting off any escape routes, applying pressure without, a big overt confrontation yet.
Crawling in ditches. That paints a picture.
Yeah.
So how did the actual capture go down? Was it another firefight?
No, and this is a really significant point the sources make sure to highlight. He was finally cornered and apprehended in a rural field there in Sibley County.
Okay.
Sources state clearly that he was armed when they finally got to him, but he surrendered peacefully, reportedly crawled out towards the officers, and critically, law enforcement confirmed no force was used during the arrest itself.
It's pretty remarkable, especially given how it all started with that shootout. It says a lot about the tactics they used at the end: containment, patience, de-escalation.
It really does. The way those teams methodically closed in, leaving him no escape route, likely created a situation where surrendering was the only viable option left, even though he was armed, allowed them to take him safely. High tactical skill on display there.
So the largest manhunt in Minnesota history ends late Sunday night, June 15th. Vance Boelter captured. What do the sources tell us about what happened immediately after? The legal steps.
He was transported pretty quickly, booked into the Hennepin County Jail in the early hours of Monday morning around 1 a.m. His booking photos were released not long after that.
And the formal charges came quickly, too.
Yes, the Hennepin County Attorney's Office moved fast, charging him with 2 counts of second-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree attempted murder. The criminal complaint, which lays out some of the evidence, was unsealed. Bail was set high, $5 million.
And potential federal charges were also mentioned.
Right. Sources indicated the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office were reviewing everything, considering potential federal charges, likely due to the nature of the weapons, that list of names, the potential targeting of officials, things that might fall under federal statutes.
And the sources also seem clear that even though he was caught and charged, the investigation wasn't totally over, especially regarding why he did it.
That's right. Authorities seemed confident he acted alone in the shootings themselves, but the investigation was ongoing into his motives, and also into whether there was any kind of broader network, anyone else involved, maybe radicalizing him or supporting him.
And the main focus of that continuing investigation seems to be
That list. The list of around 70 names and addresses found in the fake police SUV. The public officials, lawmakers, community leaders, abortion rights advocates, that and those No Kings flyers found with it, those remain central to understanding the why, according to the sources.
the continued focus on the list and the flyers really suggests authorities are looking at this through a specific lens, doesn't it? Perhaps politically motivated violence or targeted attacks.
Absolutely. The sources frame this whole incident, especially with that list as evidence, as potentially part of a larger, worrying trend of increasing threats against public officials. It raises these broader questions about domestic extremism, public safety, suggesting law enforcement sees this as possibly more than just one isolated tragic event.
Okay, so let's just step back and recap this whole whirlwind based on the sources we've looked at. It starts with these violent shootings, a chaotic escape.
Right, which immediately sparks this unprecedented, massive, statewide manhunt, hundreds of officers, multiple agencies, incredible resources poured in.
Then we saw how investigators cleverly used the clues he left behind, mainly the abandoned vehicles, to systematically track him, narrowing the search from the whole metro down to that rural county, following the breadcrumbs like that cowboy hat.
And that final phase, the capture, was this combination of relentless groundwork in tough terrain, a crucial tip from a citizen's trail camera, totally unexpected, and then the smart use of tech like drones to pinpoint him.
Culminating in that peaceful surrender, achieved through really skilled containment and de-escalation tactics, even though he was armed.
It really does illustrate so many things, doesn't it? The power of multi-agency cooperation, the detailed work needed to follow a trail, the huge value of public help when it's channeled right, and the tactical skill needed to end such a high-risk situation safely.
Our goal with this deep dive was really to give you, the listener, a thorough, informed picture of this incredibly complex event based directly on what the source materials tell us.
Yeah, sticking to the facts reported.
And as we wrap up, the sources themselves leave us with these lingering questions. They explicitly state the investigation is still digging into Boelter's motives, the real significance of that list of names, what those No Kings flyers meant, and if there were any wider connections.
Yeah, and when you think about the sources emphasizing those specific details, the list, the potential targets, the flyers, what does that emphasis tell you about how authorities might be interpreting the core nature of this crime even after the capture?
Right. It leaves you wondering about those broader implications the material points to, especially around target and political violence, and the ongoing safety concerns that law enforcement clearly still has.
Definitely something to keep thinking about as you process all this information.